I'm Mark Dawson from the Self-Publishing Show, and this is Self-Publishing Spotlight, where we shine a light on the indie authors who are changing the world of publishing, one book at a time.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Spotlight. We meet indie authors at all stages of their careers and ask them a series of 5 questions. 5 questions about their process, their mistakes and their successes. 5 answers that will help you level up your own author career. My name's Tom Ashford and I'm part of the Self-Publishing Formula. Don't forget that you can get your self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. This week's guest is Steve Moore. He's written 8 books in the action thriller genre and he lives in Mexico, though originally you're actually from the UK, aren't you?
That's right. Yeah, I grew up in Lowestoft in Suffolk, the same town as our esteemed guru Mark. We went to the same schools together, and we hung out a bit as kids. But then, since I have been a nomad for the last 20 odd years, we kind of fell out of touch. But recent years, since Mark's become a well-known author and I've been following in his footsteps, we've reacquainted through the SPF, which was great.
Cool. And yeah, we actually met in the at the London Book Fair, didn't we? This year.
Yeah, this March, which was great fun. Good to hang out with loads of like-minded indies like yourself and Mark, obviously, and all the other great guys that we get to meet there. It's a great place to hang out with fellow authors.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's jump in with the 5 questions. The first one, which is probably the hardest and one that most people seem to find quite challenging, is why do you write?
Yeah, I'm still trying to work the answer out myself for that one, but I've always considered myself a little bit creative, at least, sketching, scribbling, drawing, a little bit of writing. And I tried to focus on painting for a while until I met my now wife, Leslie, who's a travel writer, back in 2011. I started writing a bit more, doing some blogging and a bit of travel writing, but then she challenged me to write a novel, which I'd never considered, never written any fiction before. For NaNoWriMo, and she had done a few books in NaNoWriMo, so I thought, okay, I like a challenge, I'll give that a go, and I did, and I followed that through, and that became my first my debut novel in 2014, which was a literary novel. Probably the less said about that the better, but that was where I got my start. I've never really stopped.
Cool. And you've actually started a collaborative project, haven't you, recently?
I have a few, actually. The book fair was where this all began, and the online communities are fantastic for meeting people. So Dave Behrens of the SPF was the first guy. He actually approached me. We'd known each other a little bit through joint promotions and things, and he invited me to collaborate on his brand new series, which was amazing. Very honoured to be part of that. So that's going great. In fact, today we launched our first book in that new series, and then I also got to meet Adam Croft, who most people are aware of. Lovely fella, great guy, and we got chatting. And then out of the blue, a few days after that, I got an email from Adam inviting me to collaborate on his brand new series, which, as anyone listening to this can imagine, that's quite it's an endorsement for whatever skills I might have, but a great confidence booster. And Adam's a great guy, so we're well underway with our new series, which should be available, I think, at the end of July. So very exciting times. Very
cool. All right. Yeah. Well, and you're self-published rather than traditionally published or hybrid or anything like that.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Proudly self-published, and. We all know it's probably the future. We've all had the dream of scoring that big deal, but I don't really think about it. I'm just happy doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, whatever may brings in money, really, isn't it? It keeps it being a living.
Yeah, it's my job now. So it's you have to treat it as a job, otherwise it just is a hobby, and no one gets paid for their hobbies, as far as I know. So
yeah, cool. Well, question number 2 is how do you write? And which of course has very different answers you could give to that. But let's start with are you more of a plotter or a pantser, as they say?
It's vague answer, but actually both, because I definitely am an outliner. I am a plotter for sure when I start out on a new manuscript. But I do allow myself the freedom to pants it as I go along, and quite often I find that with an outline to begin with, the the pantsing becomes more fun, and actually some of the best unencumbered ideas I have come when I veer off my plotted outline. So I have to answer both, but I always start out with a solid plot and an outline, because that keeps me focused on the end point of any given story. So the answer is both, but I start out as a plotter.
Yeah, fair. And do you have any sort of preference for what platform you use to write, like Scrivener or Word or anything like that?
Yeah, technology is definitely my weak spot in this whole business. But I do. One of my early gifts from my wife was a Scrivener package. So I've been using Scrivener for all of my first drafts, but that's as far as I take Scrivener, because the technology of it is just a bit too much for my small brain. So I always export and then finish up in other platforms. But Scrivener is my go-to for my first and second drafts, definitely.
Cool.
And I highly recommend.
Nice. Yeah, I do as well. It's great. And is there a particular place that you write? Is there like a favourite sort of writing spot that you have? Or?
I'm lucky enough to have, we live in Mexico, as you said, so I have my office space in my house. But I also like to work in the garden. It's very peaceful in our neighbourhood. The occasional stray dog and ice cream van coming around. But we have a nice roof terrace, so I often write there. And if I need a change, which I often do, I go into our beautiful downtown. There's lots of coffee shops and bars that I quite often can be found writing and having the odd beer or glass of wine whilst getting on with the work. So I've loads of different places, and I'm pretty comfortable at working anywhere, really. So
sounds like a hard life you've got there.
It's tough. Yeah, I manage. I don't know how I do it for the money sometimes.
Okay, question number 3 is, are you a full-time author? If you are, how did you get there? And if you aren't, what steps are you taking to make it happen?
Yeah, I actually am a full-time author now, but that is not simply because I've been successful and can afford to be. I'm just lucky enough that my wife gets it. She's a writer too, and she sees the potential here with the books are doing okay, but not quite well enough that I could afford to go full-time without the support of my generous wife. We live in Mexico for many reasons. One of them is it's cheap. We don't have too many outlays or overheads. So yes, I'm full time, but I need to take it to another level now to justify it financially, because I'm not quite there yet.
Cool. Question number 4 is, what mistakes do you think you've made, and what do you think you've got right?
Well, I think most people ask that question would say lots of mistakes. I've made plenty, but I guess my biggest one is not starting this whole thing earlier, because I realise I've got hundreds and hundreds of ideas that could be turned into a book. It's only just in the last 3 years really that I've been really taking it seriously. I wish I'd have started earlier, but we could say that about anything.
When did you start writing in a serious manner?
Probably really, really seriously 3 years ago, and then the middle year of those 3, I had a full-time job that was really manic. I was working 50, 60 hours a week for the year, so I didn't have too much time. So I kind of stalled a bit, and then since that year, more or less since the London Book Fair of last year, I've been at it as a full-time job. So 3 years, but with a year off in between.
Fair enough. And question number 5, which is, what's your final piece of advice for authors starting out in indie publishing? Where to start? Basically, get the words down on the page, because quite obviously, if you're a writer and you're not writing, then that you'll have nothing to show for it. So first of all, get the words down on the page, however you manage it. If it's 10 minutes a day, or you can get a couple of hours a day, or if you're lucky enough to have 3 or 4 hours a day, whatever it is, get the words down, get that first manuscript finished almost before anything else, because without words you have nothing, and you can't really say you're a writer unless you are writing and have something down. So just get the words down on the page. It's obvious, but that I needed to tell myself that 4 years ago, and it's only the last 3 years that I've actually followed my own advice. Well, it's the advice of hundreds of great people out there telling us the same thing. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
And listen to people who know better than you do.
Yeah.
Mark example. Mark's a great one. Joanna Penn, loads of great guys out there offering their services and advice and encouragement, usually for free. So listen and take on as much as you can.
Nice. Now, this isn't one of the 5 questions. You're now off the hook for the those 5. This is more of a. I mean, I've noticed that you're obviously quite a well-travelled man, at least from a UK perspective. Someone living in Mexico seems fairly well-travelled, and your books seem to have, from a glance, seem to have a sort of theme of different cultures and histories and things like that. So, is there an element that you've taken influence from travelling for your work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. I've always travelled. I left Lowestoft for the first time in, giving my age away now, 1993. And I've never really lived back in the UK for more than a year or so at a time since then, apart from when I went to university. So all of those travels have given me so much knowledge and inspiration. All the people I've met, the place I've been. That also inspired my degree. I did a triple degree in archaeology, art history and anthropology.
Nice.
So all of those things that I learned on that course, which was still the greatest thing I've ever done, and now in my books. You mentioned my books, so that Bali, Peru, Japan, Mexico. My last book was set right here in San Miguel in Mexico. So all of my books are places I've either lived in. They are set in either places I've lived or I've traveled extensively and spent a long time in. So, one of the old writing cliches is write what you know, but I also like to say write where you know.
Nice.
So, and I think my readers have said that they have felt that they've been traveling along with my characters in the journey. So that's great. And I like to put that into all my books.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Tom. It's been a pleasure.
You too. That's it for this week's Self-Publishing Spotlight. Don't forget that you can get your free self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. And if you want to appear as a guest on this show, send us brief details about yourself and your writing to support@selfpublishingformula.com using the subject line Self-Publishing Spotlight. I'm Tom Ashford, and I'll see you again next week.